Welcome to our live stream on Ultimate Australia YouTube. We're at the Div 2 Australian National Championships as Aurora pulls the disc for the first point of this game as Factory Frenzy in white receive the disc. It's a lovely day here in Canberra. No wind to speak of. It's a bright blue sky, perfect grass. It's 28 puts up a long disc. And that opens up Factory's account 1-0. And I think we've got Blair Munro on the line.
Frenzy. Yes, hi Phil. Again, as you said, my name is Blair Munro. Proudly brought to you by Hamatron. People who taught me everything I know about the sport, even if they're not going to admit it. Factory Frenzy going up by 1 over NSU with a great, efficient first point of the game for the Frenzy. And so we've just come off the back of a fantastic matchup, our first match between Quench Y and Melbourne Carnage in the Open division, doing great work. We've now moved on to the women's division. The guys are not here to hold us back anymore. The ladies are coming out to put their very best efforts on Factory Frenzy to come down on defense. So we are in Canberra. Factory Frenzy from the Australian Capital Territory. The home team advantage, giving them a quick early point on the board. NSU desperate to answer with one of their own as they come out on offense. So the signal for the pull is given. Frenzy put the shot up, targeting that near sideline. A little bit more than halfway, maybe sort of 40 or so meters down the field. A great opportunity for them to set up a defensive pressure, which we do see. A defensive zone. Looking at sort of a 2-3-2, something in that vein, but it's not enough to stop the Aurora working around that zone defense. A couple of chip shots following a nice crossfield shot. Again, we don't have a huge amount of upfield, downfield wind. But Aurora making great work again. High edge interception by Factory Frenzy cleanly. Could be a symptom of New South Wales Ultimate that we're seeing a lot of edge discs today. But a bit of a miscommunication on the throw there gives the opportunity back to Aurora to close off with a laser beam straight into the end zone.
Yeah, nice quick play.
Responding with a point of their own.
Quick play there off of that defense to get a disc back, and Frenzy hadn't had a chance to pick up all their players, leaving a player free on the near side. That was seen by the handler with the disc for an easy score for Aurora.
And that really is one of the key things that we see in this competitive Ultimate. With players on these teams being forced to learn how to play offense and defense at the same time, a single turn of the disc forcing you to have to switch mindsets. The team that makes that mental switch fastest is going to be the one that's capitalizing on plays like that. So Aurora making great display of their mental agility, recognizing a turn, getting into position quickly, closing out the point off a couple of passes. Really great work by them. So the pull goes up. Frenzy trying to work the disc, predominantly with just their handling, to find a bit of upfield gain. Really nice, clean connections, but a miscommunication. They're trying to maybe move out of the throw a little bit, and so the disc finds turf instead. A great deep cuts developing there, barely covered by the Factory Frenzy, but defensive pressure on the mark seals that long option off. We're instead forced to look back. A high floaty backhand around the mark sees NSW Aurora generate a turn there. Factory Frenzy now. In the red zone, a great initiation cut there. Player completely unmarked, but nothing develops as the defense get back and set up. Tries to cook it, puts the heater out. We'll get to see that one again. Yep, so there's that backhand going over the top. Great handle defense there. Some really nice cuts in NSW Aurora, but smart defense by Factory Frenzy means they're not overcommitting to them. Maybe not biting on some of that offensive pressure. Again, just that miscommunication. It's one of those tough things to do, is to get those quick throws off, to get them to come out clean, particularly on that forehand side. I think a lot of players maybe struggle to develop that control. So having a throwing coach is always a huge benefit. And not just in the women's division, but across all Ultimate players. I've had the privilege of working with Jamie Erickson from Jet Throwing, who's absolutely wonderful to work with, putting together a essentially customizable set of analysis and drills to help develop players throw in pretty much any conditions. So some of these forehands that we're seeing are maybe a little bit forced, and that's where these turnovers are being generated from. So it's always pays to maybe take things back to look at those fundamentals. Huge shout out there to Jamie Erickson certainly for helping me with my throwing, and for helping a lot of other players be able to put up hucks exactly like that one. But it goes a little bit out of bounds. Maybe that cross-field breeze that we spoke about in the previous game, Phil, moving from the near sideline to the far sideline, pushing that disc just out of bounds. It'll come back in where it crossed the perimeter lines.
Yeah, a little bit of breeze just picking up as we're speaking at the moment. Frenzy set up in a vertical stack. It's a great read that the disc would fall short of her, managing to box her defender out of that play. And as a result, Factory get the score.
Great work there. So again, just shifting the mark, finding that wide open space. We saw that forehand come out nice and clean, a little bit of edge, which is exactly what you want on a situation like that, particularly as you're targeting, in this case, the open sideline moving in that direction. That forehand's going to curve up towards the near sideline, curve back a little bit towards center field, which gives you an opportunity as a receiver to really close off wherever your defender is. You can use your body a little bit more, even though it's a non-contact sport that we're looking at here. You can use your body to seal off their path and get a cleaner reception of any disc that comes in from those angles.
I don't actually have the pool draw for this one. Do you have that in front of you, Blair?
Unfortunately, not, but I might be able to pull that one up for us in just a second.
Blair's commentating from New Zealand. My name's Phil Shields. I am on camera one and doing some commentary work also, just so the viewers at home know how we're bouncing.
So I think I'm not able to tell just at the moment. It looks as though both of these teams might be seeded pretty evenly, which, based on the scoreline that we're seeing at the moment, makes a lot of sense. We're just seeing a couple of trades going. Pull goes up, got a nice bit of edge on it. It's going to hit maybe a little bit short ball, but stopped quickly by the NSU Aurora offensive side. We're seeing Factory Frenzy come down in that zone again, so rather than looking to isolate those individual matchups, we're seeing them look to isolate space instead, and it does the job. It generates the turn. Factory Frenzy maybe 10 meters away from their own offensive end zone, hoping to put another point, widen up that margin a little bit. We might see an isolation play. There it is. Just great cut to that open side. Defender not really close enough to make a play on that disc as Acts Factory Frenzy go up by another 1 point, making the score 3-1 over the NSU Aurora from New South Wales.
Just going to chime in for a second. This is Rex here. There's 10 teams in the women's division, and these teams are seeded 3 in each of their pools. So in the initial pool play, everyone plays 1 crossover game. So this is seed 3 in pool A versus seed 3 in pool B. So this is testing the strength of the pools, which is a pretty cool idea. So this should be a close contest.
Thank you so much for that, Rex. Yeah, so great insight. So these teams operating in the assumption that those pools have been reasonably even, having a crossover game like this is, as you said, a great idea. I'd like to see that rolled out in a few more tournaments to just test whether or not those initial seedings, those initial pool placements have created as competitive a match as possible, particularly at a competitive level like the Division 2 Australian Ultimate Championships that we're watching right now. You don't just want these teams to be playing with the final in mind. You want them to be learning and developing through every single game. The difference between summative and formative feedback, you want these games to be as formative as possible. You want them to change and grow and develop over the course of a tournament. And making sure that those pools are balanced and that those seedings are accurate with a crossover game like this is a fantastic idea that I'd like to see implemented a lot more. So great work by the NSU Aurora there for a score. So quick, we barely caught it. Number 21. And again, that dewy grass, Phil, you were asking for layouts in the previous game. It might not have had the clinical body-saving technique that we see in some competitive layouts, but we took to the ground. We put a score on the board for the NSU Aurora. It is 3-2, only 1 point in it, as we close out the 13th minute of the game. NSU Aurora to come down on defense now. Factory Frenzy on offense. We've seen the Frenzy come down with a really great zone defense. I'm a huge fan of zone defense. I think particularly with respect to person defense, it's really easy for individuals to kind of beat themselves up a bit when they get beaten. And it puts a lot of pressure on the individual, whereas with a zone defense, you have 7 players who have to be working together. And as one of, I guess, my old coaches always used to say, if everyone is on the same page, there is no wrong decision to be made. And I think that takes a lot of the mental and individual pressure off, but allows you to focus that energy into playing harder. So huge fan. Big thanks to Factory Frenzy for sending that one down when they have come out on defense. We'll see if NSU Aurora answer with one of their own as Factory Frenzy quickly center the disc, gain a couple of yards. Great undercut there. Good sealing off of the defender, threading on through, but in by NSU Aurora. We'll see how they respond at the halfway mark. Not quite pinned down, but pushed to the far sideline. Sends a big shot. But again, the New South Wales style that we've seen from teams in this tournament so far on stream, we're seeing a lot of edge on these throws. Might pay to take that one back to the drawing board and just really consider getting those that precision over distance. Once again, Jamie Erickson from Jet. Definitely worth getting in contact if you yourself are picking up a disc for the first time, or if you're playing at a competitive level like this and you're wanting to make those line shots like we've just seen come out a little bit cleaner, a little bit more precise. Definitely gets my highest recommendation. Absolutely that I talk to.
Where is Jamie Erickson working at the moment?
So she's based out of America, but doing some fantastic work at skills and coaching development. Put together a really, really great program. Very, very communicative, and I would say that she's probably maybe 5 hours ahead of where you are, Phil, in terms of time zone. So it's not unmanageable to try and get those consultations and get that communication started up.
And how can we contact?
Great line shot there. So Aurora with an opportunity on that far sideline. Oh, no, the disc will go back. So it looks like a pick may have... no, won't have been a pick. If a pick is called and the disc isn't completed, it's a turnover. So that's a bit curious, but unless the pick was called before the play. So NSU with the disc now. The Aurora, a great low forehand there. Gaining a few yards just outside the brick mark there. Bomb up, comfortably received. Great separation from the frenzy defense. Number 99 signaling, send it deep. I'm ready. There it is. The disc secured with the first point of contact inside the zone. It looked a little bit close there, but great body awareness to put another point on the board, giving us a tied game. Frenzy coming out strong initially with a couple of back-to-back breaks, putting us at 3-1. NSU Aurora answering with some of their own. Great work there by both sides to keep this game as competitive as possible. And as Rix, as you pointed out earlier, that we are seeing a crossover in the pool play to test the seeding for the pools, to test the accuracy of the pools. And it certainly seems like we're getting the results that we were looking for. Just another reminder that as I am commenting from New Zealand, where it is currently 1 p.m. in the afternoon, I do know the outcome of this game because it's already completed. 1 o'clock being 2 hours in the future. I will not spoil it for any of you watching at home because it is an absolute nail-biter of a match.
So you wouldn't want any spoilers at this point in time in the match. What I think the spoiler we can give today is that we're in for a great weekend of Ultimate across the next 2 to 3 days. That will be live streaming on Ultimate Australia on YouTube. If you are watching the live stream, please tell your friends, tag them in social media, give them links and let them know if when their favourite teams are on. They'll be able to see a lot of good Frisbee games this weekend.
So the pool goes out of bounds around maybe a little bit past the halfway mark. So it's a choice to be made for the Frenzy as to whether or not they want to bring that in at the brick mark or bring it in at the sideline. So they've decided to sacrifice about five or so meters of upfield advantage in favor of having that disc centered, not having to work it off the sideline. Great cuts developing in that deep space, converting to an under, knowing that the NSU Aurora defensive pressure is enough to stop that disc moving. So defenders are kind of sagging off a little bit, maybe not committing as much on some of these undercuts. Great big throw over the top of the Aurora handler defense. Immediately, the Frenzy, we see them work back upfield. But there's the defensive pressure from the New South Wales side. There it is. The long bomb goes up. Receiver in space. But the little bit of miscommunication. The disc finds turf instead. Another bid by the NSU defense, but it stays in Frenzy's hands. Continuing to work the disc up the field. Closing that one off. Just outside of the zone. Knocking. There's the isolation cut. Pulling defenders out of space. Frenzy with a static reception for the score as we enter the 20th minute of the game. Frenzy 4, NSU Aurora 3.
timeout called.
And a great time to call a timeout there. So the typical play is that teams will have 2 timeouts, 1 per half, and then a third floating timeout they can call at any time. Calling a timeout when a game is quite tight like this is a great move, because the questions that are going to be on the coach's mind and on the player's mind are, what about our offense is working and what about our defense isn't? Because those are the 2 things that you can tighten up to really change things up. We're seeing quite a few turns, some of them forced, some of them unforced. If we can tighten up those offensive plays, we can do a lot better job of keeping possession of the disc when we get it. And if we can tighten up our defense, if we can figure out what isn't working for the opposition, we can capitalize on that, change things up a little bit, and generate more turns. And so when the game is as tightly contested as this, there's only a single point in it, we're seeing a lot of hype being generated, trying to keep that energy up. It is the question of what few small changes do we need to make in order to claw back that advantage. Had the point deficit been a little bit wider, maybe sort of a 3-0, something in that space, the team on offense, not rather the team on offense, the team who is ahead, they have a lot less to talk about. They know what's working. All they need is energy. The team on defense probably has a few more work-ons. When a game is this tight, both teams don't have a lot of room to adjust to swing the momentum heavily one way or the other. So Frenzy now, having just put their 4th point on the board, will come down on defense.
So from what you've seen of the game so far, Blair, what do you think the coaches would have been telling the players on each team?
Well, I mean, considering that a lot of the turnovers that we've seen made by the NSU Aurora have been some of those bladey sort of styles, maybe the conditions that they're used to playing in. I don't know exactly what the weather's like. Is New South Wales typically very windy? Are they looking to compensate for a wind that isn't there? Maybe just a reminder, keep those throws consistent. You're doing great on defense. Don't be afraid to commit really hard when your player is clearing out of space. Just seal them off. It's when we're seeing players develop deep cuts and get that separation, that's when both sides are able to capitalize and really get some great scores. So it might be just a case of playing more honest person defense when you're doing that. Try and stick as close to your player as you can. Apply more pressure. And when you generate those discs, just have that extra second patience. We see great movement there. But again, that defensive pressure and having both of those players move into that space, pulling their defenders with them, spooks the offense a little bit, giving Factory Frenzy an opportunity to put a long shot up for a great score as they go 5-3 over the New South Wales side, NSU Aurora. So NSU Aurora now 2 points down. Phil, what do you think they could be changing? If you were to go out and on the field and say, hey side, you guys are doing great, you're playing with a huge amount of intensity, I've noticed one change that you could make to really turn this game around, what change do you think that would be?
That's a very good question. Because I'm probably paying a bit more attention to the Factory side, and what I like Factory doing is they are making single cuts, one at a time, very clean, very clear. The handlers have no doubt on the field what is happening. So I'd sort of be mirroring that, saying to the Aurora ladies, not to copy them obviously, but just really make your cut clear, concise, and commit to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's not a function of the athleticism, the energy that NSU Aurora are putting out here. It's more just a slight mental twitch. Just tighten up the game. Go back to those fundamentals. If your handlers are trying to throw to space, we can get you the disc. If your handlers are throwing to congestion, to a lot of foot traffic or field traffic, it's a little bit harder to make those connections. So just time things a little bit slower, maybe reset the pace, try and take back control of the match. So there is an unfortunate turn there for the NSU Aurora. 2 points down. Factory Frenzy looking to widen that margin to 3. The big shot going up. Comfortably received. A beautiful score for Factory Frenzy, taking them to within 2 points of ending the first half of this game. NSU Aurora down by 3 now. Again, just those small execution errors, those little bits of miscommunication, giving a strong side like the Factory Frenzy a great opportunity to consolidate and generate a momentum from those errors.
Yes, and as I was watching the point, with your question in mind at the end of the previous point, the stacks of each team were a lot clearer as I was watching that, and the Factory Frenzy stack a lot cleaner, just a nice line up the field. It was set quickly. Off the pull, the Aurora stack not as clean. Cuts were made back into players as they're still running up to try and set their stack, and so that clarity from a handler perspective, seeing a cut being made, and there are other players in the way still trying to get into the stack, it creates that congestion. It makes it hard to say, yes, I know I can commit to this, because you're wondering, where are the frenzied defenders? Is someone going to poach off while they're still collecting their player? All those sorts of questions are in the handler's mind.
Yeah, so just a little bit more structural precision from the NSU Aurora is going to be what it takes to keep them in the game. I think I agree. I've seen what you've seen. The Factory Frenzy, they've set up their structure very precisely, very cleanly, creating as much space as possible. So there we go. They've identified another opportunity to change things up. So those vertical stacks, we're seeing a lot of channels open up the side of the fields on the near and far sideline. The horizontal stack instead, things go the other way. We look at deep and shallow space.
Now that horizontal, I think, worked really well for Aurora. Gave them that structure they needed to see who was available, who was clear, and be able to make those throws. Now as the play develops, we can see still got a bit of horizontal structure there, which is good, but obviously we have a bit more flow in the game.
Slight overthrow, a second bid there to try and keep it alive, but it's not quite enough. Great pressure by number 82 on the Frenzy side, just that vision, getting those hands in the way, trying to shut things down. But again, as you can see, we've got a very, very clean stack there from the Factory Frenzy as they send a long shot up the far sideline. And Aurora getting in position to shut that down. So one more time, that side... Yeah, so that forehand had a little bit too much edge to it again. Those throws needed to come out just a little bit cleaner, a little bit flatter. The forehand in Ultimate is one of the more difficult technical aspects of any sport I've ever played. The backhand, something that tends to come quite naturally to people, but the forehand has a lot of nuance to the mechanics that I think, unless it's very, very well drilled, and we see that again, it can be a very, very difficult thing to get to come off cleanly and precisely in the way that it is required to hit some of these narrow windows that the defense are leaving open. So Frenzy go up by 1. So it is now 7-3. Factory Frenzy to come out on defense only a single point away from taking half-time. So again, there's the edge on that disc, making it a little bit harder to read. It bounces off the defensive hands, giving Factory Frenzy a great opportunity. There's the separation. And then timing that cut off that first pass to just seal out the Aurora defense and put a great score on the board for Factory Frenzy.
I really like the change-up that Aurora did then to put that horizontal offensive play into motion. Definitely cleaned up a lot of their movement, made it there's a lot of clarity there for their handlers to see what was going on. more so I feel from seeing if there are any frenzy defensive players that might have been poaching off from a traditional vertical stack.
Number 28 for Frenzy with the pull. Manages to curve back inbounds. Frenzy again setting up that zone defense. But Aurora working up the far sideline. Seemingly unimpeded. Great disc movement there. And intercepted by Frenzy at the zone, who make a quick break to start the disc moving back upfield. A laser beam through. Great pressure on the mark. The handler defense a little bit slack, allowing Frenzy to work up that sideline. A lot of edge on that disc. Overshoots the intended receiver. The backup tries to get into position but isn't able to close that one out.
Would have loved to have seen a layout on that one by that trailing last line of offense.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful thing to see when something happens, maybe some wind or the disc edge stops the intended receiver from getting it, but there's always that backup, that teamwork that just shows the importance of never letting go of the disc. Great undercut there, but a lot of congestion through that field of play. There's the layout to keep it in Aurora hands.
Great dedication.
Frenzy now hoping to finish off the first half of the game. Discs coming out low, but a great undercut and quick reset. Sends the big huck up. Starts to curve back in field. Number 99 gets a hand to it. And despite a great effort from the Frenzy, from the trash department trying to clean that one up, it's not quite enough. High release forehand, targeting the far sideline. Unmarked, looking to wind up a big huck. Holsters it, goes shorter, still targeting the far sideline. Number 5, who had that great layout before. Looking to shift that defense, trying to make the mark. Still pinned down on the far sideline. Aurora managing to work some really nice high release forehands to work around that defense. Forced to go back as nothing develops downfield. Finally breaking back towards the center field, number 99. With an opportunity to close things out, a huge edgy throw. Goes over the top of number 12. Factory Frenzy taking possession again. They're number 28, who's done a lot of work in the handler space for the Frenzy. Great cross-field shot. Opens up a little bit of space. We're on that break side now. The defense are out of position, but the disc is turned over. Great shot, but comes out a little bit high. Trying to force it, trying to get those narrow windows as wide open as possible, but it's not enough. The throw doesn't come out precise enough. Number 99, Chow for the NSU Aurora. Forced to work backwards. Great patience there. We see her faking off quite a few players as they make cuts to try and receive the disc until number 6 has that opening. And again, forced to work backwards. It's a great handler movement as they move around behind the disc to create some options. And I think that's a thing that a lot of competitive teams do very, very well, that willingness to look backwards.
Frenzy calling a timeout. It's been a long point. We'll be tired. There's been quite a number of turns, a bit of frustration. Be looking to steady the ship, see if they can not turn this one, work it up the field, score the point, and close out the half.
And it is an interesting thing to note as well, that particularly after a long point like this, the fatigue starts to set in, and it's one of those exponential things. The more tired you are, the faster you get tired. And so after a long point like this, both teams hustling back up and down the field. We're seeing body on the line. We're seeing some really great bids, acceleration to get that separation, the vision to try and quickly change direction to get some of those underthrown or overthrown discs. It starts to take its toll not only on the body but also on the mind. So that execution, that decision making starts to take a little bit of a turn as well. So a timeout like this is a really great opportunity for players to rehydrate, get their heads back in, take a deep breath, and just remind themselves that they've trained under these conditions. They train hard, they train when tired, they throw when tired. None of this is unfamiliar to them. And it's just about making that little mental switch to really tighten everything up and hopefully close out this point.
Yes, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if this timeout went a little bit longer than standard, just so everyone can catch their breath, get a bit of energy back into their legs, get rid of the lactose that's being built up. Lactic acid.
So teams breaking after the timeout.
Frenzy players almost thought they were going to go into horizontal, but now they're coming to the middle of the field.
And so after a timeout again, the offense gets set first, the defense are allowed to respond, and then play will resume.
Nothing's changed except that everyone's had a break, so putting on their fresh legs.
But we'll see which team made the most of it. Factory Frenzy with some great work up the line, but NSU Aurora respond with just fantastic defensive pressure.
That defensive fresh legs really put into action there.
So NSU Aurora not able to secure it. So again, just the watching the disc into the hands is such a key thing. Quite often players will look to throw the disc and initiate play before they've secured possession. Off the hands of Frenzy, giving Aurora another opportunity. Hoping to take the game 7-4. that timeout, maybe not have allowing those teams to recharge as much as they would have liked. We're seeing miscommunication, some minor execution errors, but those are exacerbated by the fatigue. Great work by Factory Frenzy. Some quick give-and-go passes. Comes out a little bit high. Trying to get a hand to it, but under pressure from NSU Aurora defense is enough to generate that turnover. Gained a little bit of yardage down the field. Hopefully for Factory Frenzy, the NSU Aurora errors will continue. Vice versa for the Aurora as they work back up the field, wanting to put that extra point on the board, wanting to put the work in. Some great disc movement there again.
Yeah,
so much
up now, and the mental game is coming to play as well. We are getting a few gusts.
Phil, is it still a cross breeze there in the same direction as it was previously?
A little bit right to left, but still predominantly cross.
Okay, so still predominantly a crosswind. Okay, oh, there's the big shot going up. Comes off the hands of the Frenzy offense.
Not used to these Canberra weather conditions, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if as the day draws on, the wind picks up.
Both teams just turning the disc. Comes down to which team can get the mental game tightened up the quickest to stop making those small errors that they know they don't have to make. None of these errors are being forced. It's just about patience. And so the team that exhibits the better patience, they're going to be the ones that stay cool, that they tighten up their game the quickest. The first team to do that is going to be the one that capitalizes on the opposition's fatigue. There's a great miscommunication from the defense for a long shot that goes up, but a little bit much edge on the front edge of that disc, and it falls short, falls back in, giving Aurora another opportunity. And again, it's that same thing. We're getting those interceptions. We're getting that great defensive play, but it's that initiation on the offensive play that comes after. Not quite in by NSU Aurora, hoping to close out. We're seeing some good cutter movement there. Great way to finish that point off. Slightly overthrown, but has the wherewithal to find the disc again, to get into position. NSU Aurora put another point on the board. It is now 7-4. Factory Frenzy to come back down on offense this time. We will see that again. You could see that just get caught by the wind, get pushed up a little bit. But number 8 for the Aurora manages to pull that one down. A great score for their side. Oh, number 6, sorry, not number 8. The Perils of Ponytails.
Might have heard a bit of hammering in the background a few moments ago, indicative of the wind that's now picking up here. Just had to hammer cameras and the tent into the ground to make sure they're not going to go anywhere. That's the significance of the gusting.
And Phil, just as you say that the hammers and the cameras in the tent will not go anywhere, make sure that you watching at home don't go anywhere either. For the second game of our Australian Ultimate Championships Division 2, this match between Factory Frenzy and NSU Aurora. Factory Frenzy 1 point away from taking half. NSU Aurora putting on a great show after a very long point to close that one out for their side, bringing it back to a 3-point game.
another long point. And points like that, if you win them, can change momentum, which Aurora really would like to have now. See the effect of the wind there, holding the pull-up as a zone look gets put in, as everyone recognises the new conditions that apply to this game.
So with that same stronger wind, we can hear it in the background occasionally. It's quite gusty. It's going to give an advantage to that zone because it means there are those options that go overhead are no longer there. And so it's closed off some of the offensive arsenal and has effectively added an additional defender to the defensive side. So Aurora take possession, but it's so close. It's right on their own end zone. It's a great opportunity for Factory Frenzy to set up a zone of their own. Potentially generate a quick turn and then a quick break.
What would you be saying to the Aurora team if you could be in their ears as a picking up? Would you like to see pucks into the wind or steady control, shorter passes and move it up the field?
I'm a fan, Phil, of those very, very quick, clean passes. I think shifting away from that any sort of vertical stack, instead look to put more people in that handler space. Even having 4 handlers back, stretching the width of the field, moving the disc quickly as much as possible to force that zone to keep dragging itself backwards and forwards across the field, set that fatigue in, and give the Frenzy players an opportunity to really close out this point. So a bit of an error there by Aurora.
Aurora made about 10 metres and now they've gone 20 backwards in those dumps, but they've maintained...
2 hands always being an option. We're seeing some great one-handed grabs, some really dynamic ultimate here. But as you look to create a secure environment for those discs to be caught, the slightest gust can bobble the disc, can lift it out of position. And so quite often that catching window needs to be a lot wider, but then it requires that much more in terms of reaction speed to be able to secure it. But a great work there by Frenzy to close that point out as they go 8-4 and take the first half. We will be back with you very, very shortly. So we'll just take a quick break while the players recuperate. And we will be back with you for the second half of this thrilling match very shortly.
And we're back as the pull goes up from Frenzy. Aurora receives it. That one's high. And a great read there by the Aurora receiver. Movement up the field. If you've been with us since the beginning of this stream, you would have heard that there was gusting winds at the end of the first half. The wind has died down, but as I say that, there is a little bit of a gust, but then that dies down and Aurora score the point.
Just absolute clinical ultimate there. Some really, really nice connections of passes. Lots of great work by the offensive cutters to find space off the cutter before them. So players moving into space, targeting the disc. And as soon as that disc is about to be secure, that's when you're seeing that next player move into space of their own. Some really great, well-strung together passes for NSU to put the first point of the half on their side of the scoreboard. So well done to New South Wales side there. 3 points in it, not an insurmountable obstacle by any stretch of the imagination as NSU Aurora come down on defense. Now again, as you say, we're kind of gusty at the moment. There's not a huge amount of consistency with regards to what the wind is doing. So it's going to make things a little bit more difficult for the offense to predict, but it might make things a little bit more a beautiful low pull just in front of the brick mark. It might make things a little bit easier for the defense to figure out what they want to do, but it looks like they'll be sticking to a person defense, although trying to bracket either side of that vertical stack. Factory Frenzy not having too much trouble with those undercuts. They're not making a lot of progress up the field, but they're able to at least maintain possession. Generating a turnover there as the Aurora defense gets underneath a disc that comes out a little bit squiffy. A little bit of a bobble, a little bit of a juggle, but it's kept in Aurora hands, working back towards the far sideline. Player takes a knee to keep that one in hands, and it just overthrown. Factory Frenzy with an opportunity to work back upfield now. So again, Aurora with an opportunity to keep working back the other way. About 30 meters out from a score. Lane number 5 on the Aurora side, who we've already seen have a great game. Some really nice defensive pressure from the young player. Lane again. Great long throw. Outstretched hand, but it's just too far. Factory Frenzy with possession. Great vision there, seeing that spacing. 2 cuts develop into that space, but not quite enough, despite the long limbs of number 8 on the Aurora side. Factory Frenzy pressured backwards into their own end zone. Great opportunity for Aurora to put another point, bring it back to a 2-point game. Hoping to quickly close it out. Despite body being left on the line, the disc finds turf instead. 2 attempts at it in a roll, but Factory Frenzy to take possession. A little bit of contact there, but not enough to stop Frenzy moving the disc back upfield. Great defensive pressure, having to force the Frenzy to lose a lot of yardage to keep possession. Quickly chipping back the other way. Bit of miscommunication there. The disc's going to be called down. Looks like the balance on that throw was maybe a little bit off. We can see that pivot foot, not very static, almost sort of lifting up. A bit more of a disc golf putt, which some people seem to have turned to during these COVID times. It's important to recognize again that those two sports do have different throwing styles, throwing mechanics, and so dialing in those ultimate specific skills to keep that clean disc movement, targeting a receiver as opposed to necessarily a stationary basket. It's going to be quite important in seeing these teams succeed at Division 2 Australian Ultimate Championships this weekend. Great active defense, but the up the line cut is open, and so Factory Frenzy hit that pin down on the far sideline. Send a shot up. Aurora getting a hand to it, but not enough to keep it. Although the disc knows, and a turnover is generated on the throw immediately after that. Great block by the Aurora defensive side. Lane again, number 5 to pick up. Wants to put a long bomb up, does it. Uncorks it. Great score as Aurora go within 2 of the currently leading Frenzy. Factory Frenzy yet to score a point in this half, having taken half by reaching 8 points first. It has just been a series of unanswered points by Aurora up until, or since then rather. So really, really great work there as we hit minute 62 of this game.
As I say, there was that really long point, second to last point of the first half, where Aurora managed to score. They didn't close out the half. They didn't get the next point. Frenzy did to close out the half. And I'm wondering what sort of impact that had on their halftime talk as well. Letting the players know, look, there was this long point. You did great to get the score. You can do it again. And that could be in their heads saying, let's push it out. We do actually have the ability to do this when we're tired. We've got the upper hand on the Frenzy team. Let's just do more of that. It could be in their heads and helping them give that momentum to them.
The Aurora defense coming down, the pull going just to about the halfway mark. Factory Frenzy to initiate an offense. Great 5-10 meter gain there. Overthrown on the reset. Which is exactly what the Aurora side need. Half a field to work back up. A score here puts them within 1. And despite the early lead established by Factory Frenzy, as Rex pointed out to us earlier, great grab to keep that one in hands despite cover from the Factory Frenzy side. As Rex pointed out, this is a crossover opportunity between the third seeded pools in Pool A and B to see how balanced and how strong each of those pools is. And the game, they had a wide margin earlier, but it seems to have tightened up like my belt after a Christmas dinner. Only 2 points in it now. Great reception there, but again, quick overthrow. Trying to move things a little bit quickly.
Right decision, just the execution wasn't quite there.
No one in this corner, White. No one in this corner.
Experienced Factory defender getting in the way there.
Great defensive cover by the Frenzy side. And a pick's been called. So again, being a non-contact sport, we've seen some contact avoidance leading to pursuit interference. The defense not able to catch up with their player. And so play will just reset. Players will catch up to where they feel they would have been had the pick not occurred, and play will resume. Great movement by the players to advance the disc while keeping a great position on the field. Aurora hoping to make this a 1-point game right in the red zone. There it is, almost, just on the edge. Defensive pressure by the Factory Frenzy, forcing them to go backwards.
I'd like to see a few cuts into the deeper space in the end zone there rather than just always to the front.
Great look trying to get that high release backhand over the mark using that height mismatch. Of miscommunication. They're giving Aurora an opportunity similar to the one we saw just earlier, right on the edge of glory. Slight overthrown on a wide reset option, giving the disc back to the Factory Frenzy. So no more of that crosswind. We're seeing a downwind point then for the Factory Frenzy, which again, we're seeing a lot of those discs dive into the ground. That's something to keep in mind as an Ultimate player and as a spectator. When you are throwing with the wind at your back, you typically need to release the disc a lot higher than you might think because the wind is just forcing it down towards the ground. We're seeing that a lot from the Factory Frenzy as when they aren't adapting to it, those discs are biting into the ground very early. Great reception there. Great long shot. And again, that immediate adaptation, sending that disc a little bit higher and then failing to do so, the wind pushing it down. And so Aurora not able to secure possession there. Factory Frenzy knowing what they need to do. Keeping that front edge up is going to give them the distance required. But Aurora defensive pressure getting in the way. But a call might have been made there. So there was definitely contact by the looks of things. We saw players take a tumble to the ground. And that is one of the troubling things is, as a defender, knowing that the disc is not out in front of you, having to turn around and maybe back onto the disc can create a contact, which in this case may have interfered with the Factory Frenzy players' opportunity to make a play on the disc. So players will just have a discussion, acting as referees themselves, Ultimate being a self-officiated sport. Now, I recently had the opportunity to watch a colleague play in the New Zealand Mixed Netball Championships. And considering just how aggressive some of those refs can be in terms of making calls and I guess initiating turnovers from rules infractions, it does make me grateful for the fact that Ultimate is a self-officiated sport, that even though we do have occasional stoppages to discuss some of those infractions or contacts or fouls, the fact that the players are handling that themselves and I guess the play isn't hugely interrupted by contact that may not have been considered a foul, it just means that the pace of the game stays up, which is something I really, really appreciate. So just overthrown there despite a great bid to try and keep that one in Factory hands for the score. It doesn't come off. NSU Aurora now at the front of their defensive end zone, 64 meters away from a score.
Number 28 on this frenzy team, quite experienced. You see her coaching into the lane there. She's been putting up a lot of the long shots and putting nice weight on them. That last throw is a good example. The receivers, I think, probably thought it was overthrown, but it had just the right float downwind. They just didn't see that quickly enough. Otherwise, good weight by number 28. Who's going to pick up the disc again and see what she does.
So again, great pressure. Just again, being right on the shoulder of the offense. The breath down the neck can be enough to put a little bit of doubt in the receiver's mind to generate those turns. Great score there. We'll get to see that again. As you said, Phil, that number 28, just huge awareness and vision and technical skill to put a great weight on that disc. So it just floats nicely into the hands of the receiver as we go 9-6. Factory Frenzy up over NSU Aurora. And as we hit these, or we get halfway through the 73rd minute of the game, a little more than 15 minutes on the clock left, rather. For a team like NSU Aurora, 7-9 is going to feel a lot better than 10-6. And so it's really important for them to stay in this game, to really put that pressure on. But now that they've got the wind at their backs, we're seeing that same thing, not adapting to the conditions. That first throw not released high enough, the wind pushing it down into the ground, giving the opportunity for the Factory Frenzy to put an upwind break here. Great hands there on the second bid. But a run through D. Again, lane number 5 for the Aurora having a great game defensively, just doing such amazing work for the team playing in blue. What a great breakthrough to get around that defense. But again, bobbles on the disc. Those low discs are so much harder to keep secure. So again, we're seeing a repeat. Teams trading. There's a lot of pressure on the mark. Maybe handlers being forced to throw options that they wouldn't necessarily throw in other situations. Just that pressure, giving the defense the disc again, and then immediately swapping back onto the defense for the team that was playing offense, applying pressure of their own.
Closer and closer to their offensive end zone. Just as
There
I
it
say
is. Great separation there to find a nice open receiver right at the front of the end zone, taking a knee to close that score out. Both teams will be very, very grateful for that point to be over, giving themselves an opportunity to rest up, maybe get some sideline subs on there. And a great score for the Aurora to keep that game tight as we go 9-7. Factory Frenzy up by 2 from the Australian Capital Territory. The home team, with their advantage, granting them only the slightest of margins over the New South Wales side.
One more NSU.
and wind gusting up again. So this upwinder for Aurora will be a challenge for them. See if the number 28, I think, is on the line at the moment for Frenzy. We mentioned her a few points ago. Good touch, as we say, with her disc skills, especially with those longer discs, keeping them in the air, which gives the receiver a lot more time, a lot more chance to get to the disc, which is always a nice thing to be given as a receiver. So I have a feeling that Frenzy will be looking for some significant gainers if they can.
Great pull there by number 5, Lane, for the Aurora side.
Away. Front of your player.
So as Frenzy look at the moment as though they will probably score this point. Don't want to speak too soon. But there it is. Blair, I want to ask you a question. Given numbers 28 throwing skills, she's not the only one on the team. We have just singled her out though. How can Aurora shut her down? Not too sure, we might have lost Blair. Do have an internet connection to Blair, who is commentating from New Zealand. So if there's a slight discrepancy or lag over a couple of seconds, what you see to what he says, that's the reason. We are playing the Australian National Championships Div 2 in Canberra, as are the Div 1 Championships also being played about 5 minutes away at different fields. Live streaming at the same time, so you get double the fun, double the ultimate this weekend. So we've unfortunately lost communications to Blair. We've got the dulcet tones of Phil Shields also doing camera 1. And wind is right to left. We've got Aurora. They'd want to score fairly quickly. Unmarked player. A great defensive run through by the Frenzy. And now we get a zone set by Aurora. I one goes over the top, bit of a speculator. Wind carries it back into the Aurora defensive hands. That one goes up, nice bomb, that's a gainer. That's not so bad for Aurora. Aurora. Bring the disc into the play. 4 defensive players around the cup. Really slowing down, clogging up this Aurora offense. Break side cut. That was their perfect chance to score. Now Aurora off to the races. They want to get it before the Frenzy off to the races. They want to get it moving before Aurora set the defensive zone up. As Aurora drive Frenzy to the far sideline, cramming them in, giving them few options, but each metre gained is a metre closer to the end zone. That one's 5 metres, now 2 metres out. What will happen here? That one goes into the hands and out of the hands. Frenzy with about 20 metres to gain now. It's a game of cat and mouse, snakes and ladders. There's the breakthrough. Aurora, wind behind their backs, looking downwind. Handler wants the long throw, puts it up, puts it too long. Frenzy now with full field to go again into the wind. That one goes in the air. Solid grab by the Aurora defense, just to make sure. Hoping for a quick turn, maybe a quick score. That one hits the hands of the Aurora receiver in the end zone, trying to tow it in. Aurora need to get the defense on to stop that, Hark. Good defensive grab. Toes the line. Aurora now with about 20, 25 metres to go. There's been a call on the field. Goes for a second effort. Sliding knees, going to ground, just in front of the receiver. The throw goes, still making ground. Aurora are towards their end zone, their offensive end zone. Frenzy needing to make sure of all their catches. As I say that, that's one. As the wind takes that up. Aurora receivers, I think, a lot closer than what the handler wants. Except the one at the back. That's the only one that counts. Not fast enough to get it. A matter of inches. Aurora defense already setting up their zone structure. Bit of a chat as the disc is brought. Maybe a timeout might be called. Or just wanting to throw it straight away to each other. Nice solid offensive catch by the Frenzy players. Someone streaming forward, unmarked, but no one able to pick up the disc and throw it to her. Aurora going into match defense. Sorry, a Frenzy going to match defense. Aurora, inside break throw. Player free, 2 players free. Doesn't manage to find either of them. Wind really is picking up here. If Frenzy managed to score this, then that'll probably seal the match. However, everything hinges on this. Score is currently 10-7. Frenzy on 10. Aurora 7. Aurora wanting to make it 8. Close the gap. One more upwind, one more downwind, they'll tie. Then they'll have to do an upwind to win from there. One goes high, it's a speculator. Again, her receivers unable to read where that disc was going to land. Big huck. And that's a great read. Good read from the Frenzy player. Safe hands. And that second huck, wanting to make ground. A third one. This one not successful. One too many. And as we say that, oh, if she had caught that, that would change the whole complexion of this point. So Aurora gained 2.5 of those Frenzy hucks back. Those hucks, however, are giving Frenzy more confidence in the big throws. Sideline is getting involved in this match. So I feel for at least the rest of this point, the Factory Frenzy team is going to choose to send it, gain as much ground as they can. that one up, taking it over the receiver's head, not backpedaling fast enough. So this is Factory's chance to pull away to make it 11-7. So we hear a big isolation call from the sideline.
What a grab to put that point on the board there for the Frenzy. Reaching through time and space and opportunity. An almost impossible grab, certainly from the way we saw things.
So we have Blair back. Sorry, Blair, I don't know how long you've been back with us. I had to take my headphones off, but obviously been watching that. And that was the score that Factory needed, I think, to seal the deal. And it was the one that Aurora needed to stay in contention. In fact, that is it. Sorry.
So that looks to have been the end of our game. A great start. Both teams playing some fantastic defense. Teams trading backwards and forwards. Factory Frenzy and eventually able to pull ahead a little bit. Aurora pulling back with a comeback of their own. Factory Frenzy able to really pour it on towards the end to put up a 4-point lead that Aurora were just unable.
There. Thank you very much. See you in the next time slot.
Yeah, so thank you very much,
Okay.
Blair.
Yep.
And thank you for all our spectators out there. Please stay tuned and watch our next live cast. Thank you.